Everyone that learned 770 learned by the Rebbe in New York. The years that he was in yeshiva as a bocher, those are the years that remain deep, deep in the heart of the person. And all the years later, when you think about it, the most important years and the ones that made the most impression, the ruchnizdike impression on the person, is those that were when he was a bocher. So by me, mainly it's the Chofs. I came to learn to New York at the end of Tovshin Chof, and then from then on till I got married Tovshin Lamadala, then I stayed in Kelel. But the Chofs were the most important years of Farbrangens to me. And Take, those were already after things, more 10 years after the Rebbe's Nesias. So the Farbrangens got already more establishments on this money, etc., etc. In the Yuds, the Farbrangens were only there when there was Shabbos Vorchem, which is Shabbos Farbrengen, and then Yom Tevim, the end of the Yontiv, when the Rebbe would Farbreng from the beginning before the Shkia and then go on late into the night, and also the progress of the weekdays, like the Kislev, the Bistamuz, things like that. But sometimes, very seldom, sometimes there's a Farbrengen on Shabbos and another date, another Yom of the Pagra, but not really so much. Came to the Chofs, there it started differently. The beginning of the Chofs it was still the same, but when it got in the middle of the Chofs, it came not in the middle, Mamish, Toshin Chof Dalad already, there were a lot of Farbrengens. I think in the year of Toshin Chof Dalad, Kimat every Shabbos was a Farbrengen from after Yud Shvat. Not every Shabbos, but Kimat every Shabbos. Then when it came to Tovshin Chof Hey, then there was Farbrengen Mamash every Shabbos that year, because the Rebbetzin passed away that year, Rebbe's mother, on Vov Tishrei. So the Rebbe in Zeicha Nishmas, his mother, Farbrengen the whole year. We actually found out that there's going to be a Farbrengen every Shabbos from a zettel that the Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Weinberg. Rabbi Weinberg used to teach Tanya on the radio every Motzei Shabbos. So he would have 15 minutes where he would buy the 15 minutes on the air, and he would teach Tanya. Then sometimes when there was Farbrengen on Shabbos, he would buy another 15 minutes and use that to chazer over the teichon of the sichas of the Farbrengen of that Shabbos. Tovshin Chof Hey, the Rebbe's mother passed away, so he wrote to the Rebbe that he's thinking of buying another 50 minutes after every Shabbos for Motzei Shabbos. Even there was no Farbrengen, he would chazer over a sicha from years before, Lezecha Nishmas the Rebbetzin. And the Rebbe wrote to him that this is mechazek the svara by me to have a Farbrengen this year every Shabbos. And then concerning what he wrote, that he doesn't have the money yet for it, the Rebbe said he's going to pay half of the expenses. So then we knew there's going to be a Farbrengen every Shabbos. So then there was a Farbrengen mamash every Shabbos, so that was a lot. But even from then on, it started a lot of Farbrengens more often in different Shabbosim. Tovshin Chof Zayin was a lot of Farbrengens, and then it went on like that till by the end of the Chofs and then into the Lamed also. But that's when a lot of Farbrengen started. The Seder of Farbrengen was that, how did they know that it would be a Farbrengen on Shabbos? There were those times that we knew Shabbos Mavorchim. But the other Yom of the Pagras that came out on Shabbos, we weren't sure. Sometimes there was, sometimes there wasn't. So one of the ways to know was because after Musaf, when the Gabbai would announce what time Mincha will be, if the Rebbe waited for the announcement, we knew that there's not going to be a Farbrengen. If there was going to be a Farbrengen, the Rebbe didn't wait. Right after Musaf, right after the last Kaddish, the Rebbe walked out. So we knew that there is going to be a Farbrengen. After the Rebbe started the Rashes in Tovshin Chof Hey, after the stalkers of the Rebbe's mother, every Shabbos, starting from Shabbos Parshas Noach, the Rebbe spoke on the Rasha, mainly the first Rasha, the last Rasha, and the Rasha in the middle. But that year, the Rebbe spoke on Rashas, and then from then on, actually after the year was over, the Rebbe stopped. Till Shabbos Parshas Shmeiz, the Rebbe started again because Yosef Waldman wrote to the Rebbe that he should ask him to continue. The Rebbe continued with the Rashas. So there were some years that they knew there would be Farbrengen or not based on the Rasha. Because if there was a Farbrengen, then sometimes the Rebbe would write it settled to him which Rasha is going to be Shabbos, and then we knew there'll be a Farbrengen. And sometimes when the Rebbe came Shabbos in the morning to 770, he would stand by the door, and if there was a Farbrengen, the Rebbe would tell him which Rashi is going to speak about. So we knew there would be a Farbrengens. The Seder of the Farbrengens was originally, there was no set time actually. After davening, a little while later, the Rebbe would come out and start a Farbrengen. But by the time the Chofs came, already was established that the Farbrengen started at 1:30. The Seder was the Farbrengens were not so long. It was from 1:30 Berach to 3:30. In the beginning of the Chofs, and in the middle, then it started becoming longer. And the Seder was basically that there were two siches in the beginning, then there was a Maimer, and then there was another sich at the end concerning the next week's parsha, and the Rebbe would start that by Mincha we're reading this and this next parsha, and the Rebbe would speak a little bit about that. Now, till Chov Hey, there was every Shabbos Mevorchen there was a Maimer, and every Yom Pagra and Yontiv was a Maimer. But from then on, started the Rebbe did not say a real official Maimer every Shabbos Mevorchen. It was some Shabbosim and Yom Pagra was Derech Klal. But even if there wasn't an official Maimer, the Rebbe would say what we call a Maimer Ke'en Siche, that it was really, or if they would call it Siche Ke'en Maimer, that means that it was in the tone of a Siche, even though it was a Maimer. And later on, Takim, the Rebbe was Magid and Maimorim, old Maimorim, many of them were taken from these Siche Ke'en Maimer, or Maimer Ke'en Siche, the events I would call it. This was coined in those years when this happened. The Farbrangen, there was a Farbrangen on Yud Kislev Tovshin Chov Beis, that was Shabbos, and that was an exception. And that Shabbos, the Rebbe said 3 Maimorim with the Nigun of a Maimer and 2 Siches. And then the Rebbe actually said that the reason is because the Mittel Rebbe, Kislev has a Shaykhah, so the Mittel Rebbe, that the Mittel Rebbe would sometimes say 3 times on a Shabbos Chassidus. And he said sometimes even early morning, Motzei Shabbos, he would also say Maimer. And we actually thought that since the Rebbe, that Shabbos did like the Mittel Rebbe did, we thought maybe in the middle of the night, Motzei Shabbos, there will be a Maimer. So a lot of Bochum came to 7-7 in the middle of the night, but Lepel, there was no Maimer then. The Seder by the Farbrangens was that most of the Shabbos Dik Farbrangens, the Rebbe did not make Kiddush. He did not say L'chaim. There was no wine or Mazenas on the table. Those who were Farbrangens years later sound strange. Every Farbrangen has Mazenas and wine on the table. The Rebbe would make Kiddush on Shabbos. But those years, starting from the years before, even before the Nesias, the Rebbe would not make Kiddush. Special Shabbos, and especially Yom Pagas, the Rebbe would say he's going to make Kiddush, and he would make Kiddush. That's why if you look in the Hanochas, you see some Farbrangens says, Kveit Kiddush Ad Mushlita, Kiddush Alayayin, and he made Kiddush. And the people don't understand when you mean Kiddush. Obviously, he made Kiddush, because it's not. Farbrangens were more Aruchnichike style. People would make Kiddush and say L'chaim to the Rebbe, but the Rebbe himself would not make Kiddush. Some Shabbos and the Rebbe made Kiddush. Once I remember, also was a weekday Farbrangen where the Rebbe did not say L'chaim and there was no Mazenas and wine on the table. And that was Chavdala Tevis. Which, by the way, I want to say those years in the Chofs, there were not too many sudden Farbrangens. Years later, a lot of times the Rebbe came from the Ale and suddenly he said it'll be a Farbrangen, and in a half hour there was a Farbrangen. Those years it wasn't like that. One of the times that it was Chai El Tovshin Chov Beis. So the Rebbe came from the Ale. Actually, there was a Chosim getting married that day, and the Rebbe looked for him by Mincha to see. He didn't want to say Tachnun. The Chosim wasn't there because his Chastan was in a different city. The Rebbe did not say Tachnun, and then the Rebbe said it'll be a Farbrangen. And by that Farbrangen, the Rebbe started the whole Shturim, which Nasakan, 150 years from the Histalkas of the Alter Rebbe. And this came all the way to Chavdala Tevis, when that was the day of the Histalkas. Chavdala Tevis was that year, Sunday. Alter Rebbe was installed Motzei Shabbos, so this is the same Kviyas. And there was a Farbrangen, the Shabbos before Chavdala Tevis, Chav Gimel Tevis, and we knew already by that time there was an announcement that tonight the Rebbe is going to Farbrangen at 10:25, because 10:25 was exactly the time that the Alter Rebbe was installed. The Rebbe came down, there was no Mazenis on the table, no wine. The Rebbe came down very white, pale, very serious, sat down, said a few words, then he said to sing the Alter Rebbe's Nigun, and then the Rebbe said a Maimer, a regular Maimer with a Nigun of a Maimer. Lasted for a few minutes, started with Ein Mesim Rosatere Mishali B'deik B'kirbei. And the Rebbe spoke more, and this was the Farbrangen of Chavdala Tevis, but like I said, this was Farbrangen without Mazenis, without wine. The next day, Sunday, no one expected a Farbrangen. Nevertheless, Sunday night, at about 12 o'clock at night, the Rebbe said he's going to make a Farbrangen again. The reason he didn't say before, because that's the day that there was the dinner of the Lubavitcher Yeshiva, and the Rebbe didn't want to interfere with them. The Rebbe kept on asking, that's what they said. Did Rashag come back yet from the dinner? And as soon as he heard that Rashag is back, he said it'll be a Farbrangen. There was a Farbrangen. This one was a much, much, much more freilich Farbrangen. That's a different style Farbrangen. This is one of those sudden Farbrangens that we say. The Farbrangens of the weekdays, in the beginning, there was no real set time. It was 8:30, 9 o'clock, but then it set itself up that it became 9:30. And the Farbrangen usually was the night after the Yom Pagra. Let's say Yud Shvat, the Farbrangen was not the night towards Yud Shvat, the Farbrangen was the night after Yud Shvat. Certainly, Yud Tes Kislev, when there are 2 days, Yutes and Chof. The Farbrengen was after Yutes, which is in between Yutes and Chof. The same thing, days Yud Gimel Tammuz, the Farbrengen was then. But even other times, the Farbrengen was the next night. And the Rebbe said the reason why he's Farbrengen the night after is because by Kotshim, Halayla Hel Chacharayim. Like this, by us, we know by Yidden, the day goes after the night. But by Kotshim, by Karbonis, the night goes after the day, so he would Farbrengen then. And as I said, the Shabbos they Farbrengen also, Chatchila wasn't a set time, but it became, the beginning of the Chofs already, it was 1:30, and it was usually a short Farbrengen until in the beginning of the Chofs. Later it became more. I remember there was one Shabbos, sometimes it was the Schwerigkeiten, Shabbos and Vorchen, for instance, when you said Tillim started at 8:30, finished about 10 o'clock. Now, in the earlier years, even in the Chofs, the Rebbe did not have a set time on Shabbos and Vorchen when he would come out to daven. A regular Shabbos was 10 o'clock. Shabbos and Vorchen finished Tillim, it would come out sometimes 15 minutes later, half hour later, 45 minutes later. There was no set time. Till later, it developed into that he used to come out 1:30. But sometimes in Shabbos and Vorchen, there was not much time in between. So I remember there was one Shabbos, there was a bris, I think it was an enikel of Rabbi Kazanovsky, or maybe Rabbi Teleshevsky, I don't remember exactly. And they felt there was no time after davening to make the bris between davening and the Farbrengen. So they asked the Rebbe, maybe the Rebbe will come out Farbrengen a little later. And the Rebbe said that he can't do, but what he did was, he said he'll come out to daven earlier. So that Shabbos take, davening was, Tillim was over about 10, I don't remember exactly, but the Rebbe came out very shortly after that. He came out to daven, so they finished davening earlier, and then the bris was in between then. There were other special things that happened, not mamish, we call it Farbrenges, but something special that was not common. Two Maimorim that the Rebbe said, in the middle of the week, not downstairs, mamish suddenly. One of them was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Reb Michal Lipske brought in a Sefer Torah, so they learned from that Sefer Torah by Kriya, by, I don't remember, Monday or Thursday. And afterwards, the Rebbe went into his room like he always did. And then Reb Michal Lipske sat down at the table right by the window across where the Rebbe would sit by davening by the door towards the hallway. So he sat down, took out a little mashke, l'chaim, mitamol, we see the Rebbe come in. Remember standing there? I was on the other side of the room. The Rebbe came in, sat down on the bench on that side, and started saying a maimer. Remember, we ran over. I was standing next to Rabbi Mentlik, so we both ran over, and the Rebbe started a maimer. And second time it happened was Lag Ba'omer. Remember, the Rebbe came from the Eyal Lag Ba'omer, and he stood in his place where he always stood by Mincha, which is by the door to the hallway. And when davening was over, the Rebbe started, instead of turning around and walking to his room through the hallway, he started walking to the shul, through the shul, passing during Kaddish. Now, sometimes, for whatever reason, the Rebbe would go out from the shul, not that way, but not when he stood there, but sometime when the Rebbe stood like davening on this side, he went through the Kaddish Sheni, he went through the hallway and came till he came to the lobby of some 70 and went to his room. So we thought maybe the Rebbe is for some reason wants to go through that way. The Pale, when he came to the door to the Kaddish Sheni, then there's the table there, right under the window, which is in between the two rooms. There's a bench there. Shmuel was standing there. So he moved over because he saw the Rebbe wants to go in. I stood right there, so I moved over, and the Rebbe sat down right between me and Reb Shmuel. And he sat down and started saying a maimer, which was also something that was, I don't remember other times where it happened, but in the Chofs, I don't remember that the Rebbe in the shul upstairs should say a maimer. These were 2 times that the Rebbe did it. Now, the inyanim that the Rebbe spoke about a lot in the Farbrenges of the Chofs is he spoke a lot about the inyan of the 6-Day War. And he spoke about Nifset film, which started the connection with the 6-Day War. The Rebbe spoke a lot about the fact that we have the state of Israel is not an aschal to the Gula, it has nothing to do with the Gula, it's not the beginning of the Gula. The Rebbe spoke a lot about the Russisch Eden, and he cried a lot, like in the Farbrengen of Shavuos Tovshin Chavdalet, at the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe cried a lot. Not cried, it was very interesting. It's taken too long to describe, but it was something about the Russisch Eden, where the Rebbe felt that had the people said l'chaim and sing a nigun, 2 million Yidden would get the shus to leave Russia, etc., etc. It was a very emotional type of thing that the Rebbe said. Now, the Rebbe appointed different bochim to help in Chazorah. This was Shabbos, Pasha B'Shalach, Tovshin Chavov, and from then on, Hanochas started coming out, because like this, all the youths have all Hanochas from the Farbrenges. The beginning of the Chavs a little bit, but then Tovshin Chav Gimel became very little, and then Chav Daled, not so much. From then on, started more Hanochas, because there was more official that the Rebbe made, appointed the Chayzrim. By those Farbrenges, especially of the Shabbos Dik Farbrengens in the Chofs, was not such a big crowd, which means, I mean, there are a lot of people, hundreds, but not like years later when by a regular Shabbos Dik Farbrengen you could have a few thousand people. But this had hundreds of people, but still it was much more Hamish, you felt. And people were standing closer, and they sang a lot of Hartzik in the Guden, like real Siddish in the Guden. And it felt so uplifting. You felt the Shas, you stood by those Farbrengens especially. You felt it was more Mamash Himmeldik, more in Gan Eden, more being uplifted. Now, the years later was different, was a bigger crowd and different style of Farbrengens. Even though Mitzad the Rebbe, there is no difference, but Mitzad the Mekablim, that we, the Zaitik, the Chetzenis, the things have meaning. So when it was like that you felt like this, you mamish, I remember after different Farbrengens, you push it, came out of there, feeling mamish like you walked out of Gan Eden. You felt such being uplifting, that mamish a Hatzike in the Gunim, and you felt so close to the Rebbe. You felt close. You were Begashmi as closer, but you felt Bechlal close because it was very intimate, as we say. Later became much more bright in a different style. And those are the Farbrengens of the Chofs and Chofs. Bechlal, when there would be guests come for Shabbos, besides the Yom of the Pagras, was a whole big thing. And sometimes the Rebbe made even a Farbrengen special for the guests. I remember Shabbos Pasha Yishrei, Chofs and Chof Dalet. There was a special Farbrengen because there were 3 guests then. And the Rebbe even made a whole thing about the 3 guests. It was Mendel Futterfass, Lefole Khan, and Reb Zalman Jaffe. And the Rebbe described different 3 types of people. And then the Rebbe said that the Maimer, which started by Daber Lekimas Advorim Ha'ela, but in the middle of the Maimer, the Rebbe spoke, Chazer the Maimer with the Mittel Rebbe, the Negea Lekichas, Lehoven Inyan Lekichas Anshe Chayil, the fact that the Kantonisten and the Mittel Rebbe was saying why they did it, and the Rebbe Chazer over, crying a lot. And this was all Benegea the Russisch Eden, which was an Seder, obviously, because the Mendel Futterfass was there. And this is not the only time. Like I said, during those years, the Rebbe spoke a lot about the Rosh Hashanah. But as I said before, the Rashas that the Rebbe started the Rashas that year, then the Rebbe also started the end of the Chofs about Lakut Levi Yitzchak, talking every Farbrengen a piece of his father's Torah and describing it. And there's a special style that those Farbrengens were. Now, Chas v'Sholom to use the word style by the Rebbe, but there's a special thing that people felt then by those Farbrengens. And then when the Elam got much bigger and it became, even when it especially became televised, it became mamish and much wider Weltzach. The Farbrengens are always a Weltzach. There's no question. It's a worldly thing. But Lepel, you felt it was more, this is Eigen, it's our thing. Later, you had to work on feeling it because it was in this pashet so much. But when you start thinking about those years in the Chofs and brings back those memories, it elevates you. It brings you up to a higher madrega, thinking how you felt then. And halavai, we should feel a me'ain of what we felt then. But we're sure that very, very soon, we'll see the Rebbe again. It'll be more Farbrengens again, and it'll be all the miles. It'll be the hispashtas in the highest way, and the intimacy and the feeling of connection will be there very, very soon when Mashiach will come to Korev Mamish.